Hello and welcome to this Your Vote 2022 2nd District Congressional Primary Election Special. I'm Jennifer Rooks. Two Republicans are on the ballot vying for the chance to challenge the incumbent Democrat Jared Golden in the fall. Maine Public had planned to bring you a one-hour debate between them, but one candidate, former Congressman Bruce Poliquin, declined our invitation. So we will spend the next half hour hearing from Liz Caruso. She is a small business owner from Caratunk who has been active in local government. She's also a registered whitewater guide and is homeschooling her two teenage sons. I'm joined by Steve Mistler, Maine Public's chief political correspondent, here in our Lewiston studio where we are following social distancing guidelines. And with that, Steve has our first question.
Liz Caruso, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. You framed your candidacy as one that represents the interests of rural Maine. Can you explain why you think you're a better person to represent the 2nd District, better than Bruce Poliquin, who has been twice elected to that seat?
Sure. Well, for the last 30 years, I've worked as a registered Maine guide on the rivers of Maine. I was a small business owner and owned a year-round outdoor adventure company that offered whitewater, snowmobiling. I had a bed and breakfast and an outfitter shop. And I have been, for the last 16 years, the elected first selectman of the town of Caratunk. So I understand a lot about the demands of small business owners. I understand the challenges of the Maine tourism industry. And I understand, rural CD2 is made up of a lot of small rural Maine towns, and I have been intimately acquainted with that, everything from paving the roads to writing the comprehensive plan to, serving my community in various ways. And then as a mother, as was just mentioned, a homeschool mom to two sons, I have been very active in the, with a lot of families and homeschool community. I co-founded a homeschool co-op that ministers to the needs of over 30 families every year, almost 80 kids in a given year from 4 counties. So very invested in this next generation and coming alongside of a lot of families.
So it sounds like, how does that make you different than Bruce Poliquin? And he's not here to defend himself, obviously, but.
Sure. Well, Bruce has been active in DC as a congressman. He's been active with his job on, as a hedge fund investor, and doesn't really, live and work in CD2. But I've been right here with boots on the ground and worked a lot with grassroots organizations, and I really, I have been an advocate for different issues like medical freedom and educational freedom. So I've worked with people from all political parties, all socioeconomic spheres, and I really kind of have that. I'm in touch with rural Mainers.
Jen?
We are all grieving. The nation is grieving the victims of yet another mass shooting, this time at an elementary school in Texas in which 19 children and 2 teachers lost their lives. What could you do as a member of Congress to stop these from happening?
It is beyond words, the tragedy and the loss that these families have gone through. And there's no words to express how it's just heartbreaking. Such a needless tragedy occurred. And, I think that we need to make sure that our most precious treasures, our own children, are protected. And when they're in school, those schools should be secure. So, we have security measures when you go into stores, when you go into banks, and we have security. We have ways to protect things, but we need to make sure that we're protecting our youth, innocence, and, and the precious teachers. I think that we need to make sure that we provide the resources and the training to our schools and to our law enforcement so that so that they can secure our schools, and so also they can be trained on how to handle the triggers that are evident when someone has mental health issues. You know, certainly our schools, we could institute a single point entry. We could have 24/7 cameras. We could have security in our schools. And these are just some of the ways, but certainly we can develop the solutions with the right people on task force to make sure that our school children are safe.
Do you see federal funding for those measures? It sounds like it would take a lot of money.
Well, it could. I mean, certainly if we're sending billions abroad for other nations, we definitely have some money that can go towards protecting our own citizens and the most defenseless of them all, our children.
All right, and you also are a defender of the Second Amendment. Do you see any movement that could, whether it's a background checks, expanding background checks, looking at the kind of magazines that are, limitation of the kind of magazines that 18-year-olds can purchase as part of the solution?
Right, you know, there are background checks now. They're not always as effective as we would like, but we do have background checks in place. I believe that the age isn't so much an issue. We do have 18-year-olds who are in our military. We ask them to serve our country. So I believe that we need to make sure that that they are able to have arms. But certainly we shouldn't be limiting the ability for law-abiding citizens to exercise their Second Amendment rights. So if there are millions of Americans that have guns that are law-abiding citizens, and they shouldn't be punished for those that are breaking the law. And certainly criminals and those with mental illness aren't concentrating on abiding by our laws. So it wouldn't help those people who have their intention on using violence. So I definitely affirm my Second Amendment rights and those of our citizenry, and make sure that the purpose of the Second Amendment stays intact.
So you look at no movement on that part of the solution, only looking at securing schools and looking at mental health solutions.
Well, we would start there. I mean, I think we can look at the different solutions that come up, but I'm not going to rush and make any predeterminations on special gun laws.
Steve?
You're perhaps best known for your public opposition to the Central Maine Power Corridor. I mean, you were very effective in your advocacy against that project. Was there anything about that experience that led you to this position to run for the 2nd Congressional District?
Absolutely. So, my eyes are pretty much opened when I found myself and part of the regulatory proceedings. And, I have testified for different committees on different issues, but it really became more evident when I was down there and I saw that our government wasn't run the way I thought it was. And definitely our representation has been usurped from we the people and into the hands of special interest groups or lobbyists or political agendas. And Mainers across all political parties, across all socioeconomic spheres, are looking out to be heard, to be honored, and to be truly represented by representatives who don't have corrupted aspirations for political careers, but truly want to represent the will of the people. And it's not something that's not just one party, that's everyone. Everyone deserves true representation.
Okay. Done.
Liz Caruso, what would be your top priority during your first term as a member of Congress?
Wow, there are so many. We need to make sure that our national sovereignty is in place, and we need to fight some of the national security threats that we have in our nation. There are so many, but I would say one of the top ones is securing our border. And I would say just even equally as important is energy independence.
I'd like you to expand on both of that. Securing our border, I'm wondering if you have a solution to the situation of the so-called dreamers, the people who, I was going to say young people, but some of them not even that young anymore, who are brought to this country illegally as children but now have made a life for themselves. Congress has tried and has been unable to come up with a lasting solution for their situation. What would you do as a member of Congress?
Well, I don't think that's a national security threat. I was referring to our open southern border. And so what I think we need to do is make sure, Article 4 of our Constitution requires a secure border. And so right now we have a foreign invasion along our southern border where we're not following our immigration law, we're not supporting our border patrol. We are allowing people who are unvetted, criminals, traffickers, drug traffickers, human traffickers, terrorists from coming into our border. And I'm all for proper immigration, but it has to be done properly and according to law. So that was what I was referring to.
Okay, so I would like to know what your stance is on Dreamers, but how do we better secure our southern border?
Sure. Well, let's start by following the law. We have a lot of the materials there for the wall. They're just rusting, and there are people who are being paid just to sit there, and they're contractors. So we need to get some of those things in place, and we need to send more of our forces to stop the illegal immigration, whether it's across the river, whether it's the drug cartels that are easily strategizing the way in. We need to support our patrollers because right now they are undermanned and they cannot do their job. But this could be solved. We just need strong leadership in DC who will make sure it happens.
And what about my question about the Dreamers? What do you see should happen in that situation for those young people or those young adults who have been in this country for most of their lives?
That's a good question, and that is something that I don't feel like I have all the proper tools and in place to be able to fix that. But we need to make sure that there is, again, proper immigration and people are properly vetted and properly taken care of.
Steve?
During your convention speech last month, you vowed to tell the truth about the 2020 election. From your perspective, what is the truth about the 2020 election?
I don't know if I said those words, but what I said is we need to make sure that we know the truth about the 2020 election. I'm not saying that I have the truth, but over 60% of Americans believe there was some kind of fraud, and that just can't happen. It has to be investigated. We have to make sure that all of the the accusations or the avenues in which there was supposed fraud are looked into, and we have to make sure that Americans are confident that their election, that the process of the core of our republic is intact, and that each person's vote will count, that there is no funny business with machines, that we don't have dead people voting, that we don't have trafficking of votes. It is imperative that people have confidence that they do go to the ballot box, and then they feel that they do have a voice, that they have a say in their republic. It is the foundation of our Constitution.
The former president's defeat was undisputed among election officials certified by Democrats, Republicans. There's been many recounts and audits that have verified the result. And if there's been any sort of undermining of the confidence in elections, it's often come from public officials who say that the election was rigged or something else. Does any responsibility lie with those people to be honest about what happened in 2020?
Absolutely. Honesty is key. And nothing changes with what I've said. We have to make sure, and there are a lot of cases that are still being investigated. So there are still things that are ongoing, although we're not hearing it in the news. And we have to let those things play out, and we just have to come to the bottom of it.
Do you believe that President Joe Biden was duly elected, fairly, without widespread fraud?
Well, I mean, the Electoral College, I mean, they officially certified him, but until we find out that there really wasn't fraud, until we let the organizations go through the steps of confirming it, then we can't say for sure. And no matter what, the American people deserve to know, and they deserve to have the process gone through to the fullest extent.
I guess I'm wondering what that looks like. You know, at what point can you appease everybody, especially when the person who lost that election continues to say that he won? And a lot of people believe what he says. I wonder if there any responsibility on the former president's part, President Trump.
Well, I can't speak for him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, but do you view him in any way responsible for undermining the confidence in that election?
No. I think voters can make their own determination. I don't think they're just listening to one person.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think I've heard polls that even Democrats believe that there was fraud. So I don't think they're listening to President Trump. But it needs to be followed through. We need to know.
Okay.
Liz, you've said that you are pro-life from conception to one's final breath. If elected to Congress and if Roe v. Wade is overturned, would you support legislation to outlaw abortion on a federal level?
Well, right now, if it is overturned, which I just want to say that I just think the breach at the Supreme Court was horrible, and we need to make sure that Article 3 of our Constitution, an independent judiciary, is held securely and intact, and make sure that the public or legislative branch can't influence our judiciary. But if it is overturned, then it will go back to the states. And that is, that's up to the states to decide.
So as a member of Congress, you wouldn't see yourself as a part of any legislation regarding abortion?
I think I would have to wait and see what that legislation is, but I am pro-life, so I would support pro-life, legislation. But according to this case, it would send it back to the states. It wouldn't be held at the federal level.
But there are Congress people who have said they will put forward legislation on a federal level. Would you support that?
I'd have to read the rules, but I am pro-life. So if it was something that was,
All right. And when you say you're pro-life, does that mean that you're anti-abortion, but also anti the use of commonly used methods of birth control, such as IUDs?
I am not. No. I value life. So abortion is not birth control, in my opinion.
Steve?
During that same convention speech that I referenced earlier, you said your family was personally affected by a passage of a bill that removed religious and philosophical exemptions to vaccination requirements for school kids, or kids attending public school. How were you affected?
Well, I have two children,
Mm-hmm.
and we homeschool. But
did you homeschool prior to? I mean, what I'm trying to get at, I guess, is whether or not you had to pull your kids out of school because of that change.
Oh no, I've homeschooled since day one.
Okay.
I have always homeschooled, but they, still play sports in schools and still want to attend college potentially. So, really, it's not the government's place to determine other people's personal medical choices or decisions. And it's not really anyone else's place to know what our personal health choices are for whatever reason. So it's definitely something that I've been an advocate for. Medical freedom is something that I'm strongly in support of. And I believe it's everyone's right to for their own bodily autonomy and to direct their own personal medical choices.
And that's essentially when you testified against that bill before it became law, that essentially was your central objection, is that the government shouldn't be telling us when
That's
to get
right.
vaccinated, is essentially it.
I think people can make their own educated decisions, and they know the health of their bodies, and their children's bodies better than anyone else. You know, if a child has an allergic reaction to something, no one else is going to be dealing with that more than the child, him or herself, and her parents. So it's not the government's position to mandate. I'm against mandates in general.
Gotcha.
So.
Just a general follow-up, because based off of your convention speech, you've expressed some very strong views about public schools. In your convention speech, you described them as places where, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but I'll get to the quote part,
Okay.
Where the left is essentially indoctrinating kids to, quote, judge by skin color and despise our country, and, quote, erasing innocence from childhood with pornographic sex training and encouraging our youth to be confused in who and what they are. Presumably you're talking about the teaching of history teaching the history of race in this country, sex education, and LGBTQ identity. Do you believe those topics should be completely off limits in public schools?
Well, there are quite a few topics you just mentioned there. Yeah. So, you know, I'm a big advocate of American history. I love my country. When I taught American history, I brought my children down to Lexington and Concord, to Gettysburg, to Philadelphia, Independence Hall, and to DC. We actually put our eyes on the Constitution. And it's very important to know the truth about your country and to honor it, and to be able to have that as a basis, as a foundation when you're young, so that when you grow, you will understand it. There are things that are being taught in school, right, to teach you, that they do teach you to hate America. And there's things that just aren't true. You know, the 1619, our country was not, you know, in 1619, the geography of our nation had one British settlement. It wasn't even a colony. And that was in Jamestown. It came out in 1607. The rest of the territory was under the jurisdiction of our Native Americans, the French, and the Spanish. So I don't believe in teaching things that aren't true. I also don't believe in teaching our citizens that, you know, to hate our country and that we were all bad people. So.
The framing of your comment, though, is at the convention was essentially along the lines that the left is using public schools to indoctrinate kids to basically learn these views that you're saying are teaching kids to hate our country. Why would they do that? Why do you think that they're teaching kids to hate the United States of America?
Right, that's a great question. You know, we need to, I'm not sure why they would want to do that, but that is the case, and that is just not truth. And to discriminate based on...
Or do you believe that, like, across the school, all public
schools?
No,
I don't think, but there are some schools that are doing that. We have testimonies of it. I mean, it's being admitted. And they are teaching racism. You know, when the colonies were becoming states, it was very heated. Slavery was a big issue. And when they were determining whether or not to allow a state into the country, it was a lot of it based on whether or not they were going to allow slavery or not. It was a contentious subject. It was not something that this country that they were proud of. It was a contentious subject throughout the history of our nation. So to teach that all of our founding fathers and all of our nation was horrible people that were pro-slavery is just not true. So, yep.
Okay, thanks. Jen?
Liz Caruso, do you believe that the U.S. response so far to the war in Ukraine has been appropriate? And if not, what would you be doing differently or supporting as a member of Congress?
You know, I think that it's horrific what is going on with the citizens of Ukraine. You know, no one wants their land torn apart and blown, and just the horrible war situation. And so I am in favor of humanitarian aid. I am not in favor of American taxpayer money going to fund another government. And you know, being involved, sending a lot of our military assets down to another country when our military assets are unsatisfactory right now. Our levels of weaponry are getting depleted. I also don't believe that we should be spending billions of dollars sending it to another country when our country is in desperate need in many areas. Our citizens need help. We have formula that is, not able to be found. Cans of formula are being sold for $45 a can. This is horrible. These are our citizens in need. We have gas prices that are off the charts. We have a foreign invasion on our southern border where our border patrol could use our help. We have crisis after crisis in our own country, and our dollars and our Congress should be doing whatever they can to support the citizens of the United States.
All right, thank you very much, Liz Caruso. We are out of time. Thank you to you, one of two Republicans seeking the nomination to challenge incumbent Democrat Jared Golden in Maine's 2nd Congressional District this fall. The other Republican, former Congressman Bruce Poliquin, declined our invitation to be here. You can see this program again tomorrow at 4 p.m. on Maine Public Television or hear it on radio at 2 p.m. And you can find it anytime at mainepublic.org. I'm Jennifer Rooks, and for Steve Mistler and all of us here at Maine Public, thank you for tuning in.